Hello, respective viewers. I'm George from Ireland. So I'm very pleased to say that it's a little over 24 hours till the presidency of Donald J. Trump is over, and I can say confidently that he shall never return as president again. So he served but one term, and I know a person can serve a maximum of two, but I would bet the house on him not getting a second term. For a president to lose and then win a second time hasn't happened in well over a century. Even then, it happened but once, if memory serves. So thank goodness Trump is going, and his presidency will end the same way it began, with complete self-absorption and egregious ill grace, and that's what he's made his trademark throughout his 4 inglorious years. It was only about 13 days ago that he convoked that mob. He incited riot and rebellion because he was outraged by the democratic process working, that he lost fair and square, and this was irrefragably proven. So he incited unlawful violence. Now, he's often been unbecoming, but this is one of the occasions which he's been flagrantly felonious. So Trump has revealed himself yet again as a sworn enemy of democracy, of truth, of law and justice, and I would really like to see him get his just desserts. I would love to see him have his collar felt the moment Joseph Robinette Biden is sworn in. Trouble is, I doubt he will, and no former president's ever been arrested that I know of. So Trump's all-out assault on truth may have repercussions which will last for decades beyond his lamentable presidency. His presidency was made up of so many liars telling lies about lies, and Trump himself told many alternative facts. That's lies to you and me. Kellyanne Conway, his spokeswoman, who had denounced him as a fool and a bigot before she got a well-paid job, and suddenly her ethical concerns about him miraculously vanished. Anyway, so Republicans will move on in some ways, but a nemesis is a sine qua non of republicanism. They've always had one, or to some extent Democrats have one, but to find themselves against the other. These days it's often immigrants, whether legal or illegal. It's been liberals, it's been pinkos, the East Coast establishment or whatever. Not terribly scary bogeyman. Obviously not long ago it was commies. Trump uniquely goes weak at the knees for a communist tyrant. He fell in love with Kim Jong-un. Think about it. He fell in love with the cruelest, most savage communist despot on the planet, who runs this tin pot tyranny. Wow. You'd think that Republicans would be vomiting at this. Certainly, many Republican presidents would be spinning in their grave to hear those words, and yet it was lapped up by the party faithful. Sometimes it's been African Americans, or it's China these days, or flower power and things like that. And Trump, I don't think, is not openly anti-black, and he has done a few things for black people, promoted some African Americans to high positions. Curiously, I think the one group he's never had a go at, even indirectly, is gays. I wonder why. I don't think any work's been done into that. What's behind it? Anyway, so Obama, he comported himself with a dignity that it would profit Trump to study, and his decorum throws Trump's manifold inadequacies into embarrassingly sharp relief. So Trump tried to overturn this election, and he failed in over 60 court cases. I think he won one about some trifling issue. He failed in state capitals to block the election being certified. He failed to get the U.S. Congress to not certify it, and then to try and prevent them doing so in the peaceable and lawful manner. Then he urged that mob to take it by force, and they burst in there with automatic weapons. I'm astonished the death toll was only 5, because they could have opened fire, the police could have opened fire. It could have been a massacre. Admittedly, some of those people died of natural causes, but surely this was brought on by the tense and stressful situation. So that was an accessory ship. He encouraged their felony, and therefore he's equally responsible for what happened afterwards. He more than abetted their crime, including the murder of a police officer. So they patently had this in their contemplation. Their intention was to take it by force. Obviously, the police can resist it, and it's a bitter irony that the police officer who was murdered by the Trumpsters was a Trumpster himself. So the Trump administration leaves behind an infinitude of lies, and it's so warped the minds of many people. Many of them, a bit like Trump himself, genuinely struggle to tell fact from fantasy. So Trump has exemplified the big lie theory, first expounded by Dr. Joseph Goebbels, that the bigger the lie, the more people will fall prey to it. If you lie often enough and brazenly enough, a lot of people will believe that. There are plenty of mentally subnormal people out there who fall for these things, especially those who want to be tricked. So it's staggering to see this unique indulgence which is extended to this uniquely asinine and deceitful president who could just get away with anything. His own Fifth Avenue principle, as he propounded it, that he could shoot someone dead on Fifth Avenue in broad daylight and get off scot-free. So he's often expatiated on his impunity. He seems to have been stretching the bounds of that in recent days. So he's as unsubtle as a punch in the face. And the blatancy of his crimes, again, is just jaw-dropping. So 47% of Americans voted for him, which, again, is a nauseating statistic. It's a higher share of the vote and, indeed, a higher number of votes than it was last time. Some people who didn't vote for him the first time voted for him for the second time. Almost everyone who voted for him in 2016 cast their ballot in his favour again. But his approval rate has plummeted to 30%. I mean, it tends to after they've lost, but not that much. Those 74 million people who put their faith in him on polling day are still around. That's what we're going to see. So Trump is gone as president, but Trumpism may well live on in some form. It's a political bacillus which has been carried to the red states in particular, and may yet infect a rising generation who have not yet got the right to vote. And meanwhile, there are well over 3,000 coronavirus deaths every single day in the United States. There's really no sign that it's peaked. So that's a 9/11 every day. That's not ordinary mortality. It's true that some of these people are quite old, some of them have pre-existing conditions, but they're still dying earlier than they otherwise you would do. Not necessarily a matter of months, could be a matter of years. And I know a lot of natural deaths anyway, but nevertheless, if you look at overall mortality, it is significantly higher than usual. Not 3,000 deaths are higher a day, but still higher, in the hundreds higher. But of course, Trump doesn't care two hoots about that. He's utterly unconcerned. He's lacked the mental furniture to deal with this pandemic in terms of like his attention span, his just lexis, his comprehension of concepts, and the fact that he's afflicted with zero empathy. Being conscienceless has actually helped him in business and politics because he could throw people to the wolves. He could renege on promises shamelessly because he's not burdened with one iota of common decency. So not his inauguration, the inauguration's coming up. He's not going there, not going to run the party, but he find it too humiliating. You think he'd see it as a last chance to jump up and go to the podium and grab the microphone or something. But no, he's not doing that. Skulk off, tail between his legs to Mar-a-Lago, presumably. I thought he might try and hold an alternative event, but it doesn't look like it so far. He wanted some farewell event, and he did get some of his knuckle draggers to show up to his last hurrah, an oration at the White House. He's a rather poor rhetorician, and he contrasts very starkly with, say, John F. Kennedy. When I was 7, I was privileged enough to meet Ted Sorensen. Of course, being so little, I had no idea who he was. I'd never even heard of JFK. Theodore Sorensen being Ted Kennedy's speechwriter. And the other day I was listening yet again to that magnificent and immortal oration of these sonorous chiasmic maxims composed by Ted Sorensen. You will find their way into any dictionary of quotations. These are marvelous invocations of morality, of courage, of the highest ideals that will re-echo down the centuries. And you compare that to the tribe which Trump serves up, which is so utterly disingenuous. So Trump faces legal liabilities aplenty. The sky is full of chickens coming home to roost. about abuse of office, about breaking the emoluments clause. And there was very clear examples of this, sending Mike Pence and his entourage in Ireland to stay at Trump's hotel on the Atlantic coast when they're meant to be at meetings in Dublin, which is on the Irish Sea coast, the far side of the country, and sending US troops to stay in his hotels in the United Kingdom, and on and on. And foreign governments attempting to curry favour with Trump by hosting events at his hotels, hiring them out, which he's a completely transactional president. It could scarcely be more obvious. Even a toddler could join the dots there. Issuing security passes to relatives who didn't have security clearance, employing Mike Flynn despite the FBI saying that this was highly perilous. He would jeopardize national security. He lied to the FBI. Anyway, the Mueller Report, which did not comment on the inculpation of Trump otherwise, it's just not the FBI's policy to pursue criminal investigations or to charge sitting presidents. He will no longer be a sitting president. He certainly was not exculpated, as he and Bill Barr bogusly said. So the collusion of the Trump campaign with the Russian external intelligence, Sluzhba Внешняя разведка, may well come up as a court case. So his fallout with Giuliani might be very consequential. And Giuliani's epitaph ought to be his legendary assertion that truth is not truth. Now, I know the word Orwellian is so overused, it seems worn out. Jaded and trite though it seems, it's apposite in this case. Truth is not truth. That is Giuliani's dictum, and that really sums up the Trumpist attitude to veracity. So Giuliani said 2 years ago that he has the dirt on Trump. He said this live on Fox News. So if poignarded in the back, he has embarrassing information, probably incriminating information, Trump, which he could give to the FBI as part of some sort of plea bargain for himself. So Trump is traitorous. His consiglieri are thrown to the wolves without any qualms of conscience, because Trump is all about self-aggrandizement, self-preservation. That's his lodestar. He demands blind loyalty, but this is strictly a one-way street. He does not reciprocate. So, mutuality is what makes a relationship of trust a real one. So he is up to his eyeballs in debt. We'll finally see his tax return, and he's thought to be billions of dollars in debt. Deutsche Bank won't lend him a bean. Nobody else will. It was only the Russian-based banks, as well as Deutsche Bank after 2000, would ever lend him a brass farthing. So will he try and launch a new show? I mean, I think the major networks won't touch him. He's toxic. I know he's got name recognition. Maybe Trump, maybe Fox will, but he's the oxygen of publicity has been cut off. No Twitter, no Facebook, no YouTube. There's this other thing called Telegram, I think, will put out his videos. Not sure if you can go on TikTok or any minor network. The thing is, they will be losing a bit of money, these major networks, but they might say, no, we actually have an ethical bottom line, so perhaps they'll be frozen out. And I suppose that people have just got bored of him. They're at a surfeit of Trump. So grab him by the pussy. That ought to be the Trump doctrine. Go down in history. So what brownie points does he have? Well, he didn't launch a nuclear war. Well, got a few hours left yet. He did not start a war against Iran. He was a bit of saber rattling. He came close. He marched his troops up to the top of the hill. It massively backfired. Probably a mistake electorally. Tucker Carlson, his guru, urged him not to launch a war of aggression against Iran. So, and Iran has got 12 times more enriched uranium now than it did when Trump came to office. So that's been a spectacular failure even in his own terms. Trump's not achieved peace between Palestine and Israel. He's not achieved any disarmament of North Korea. He did not win the trade war against China. He did not bring jobs back to the Rust Belt. He did not build that wall. Mexico did not pay a penny for it. He did not make medicines cheaper. He did not make them better. He did not fund Medicare. He did not fund Medicaid. He did not end the carnage. He did not drain the swamp. He did the opposite of almost all of these things. So his criminal incompetence was laid bare. His just indifference to the common weal is very plain for anyone to see. So if it were not for him, it could have been contained. It could have been handled much better. The United Kingdom was one of the few countries to have it worse but partly because it's a more densely populated country. So he's issued pardons aplenty, well over 100, mostly to the affluent and well-connected. No surprises there. He hasn't even attempted the self-pardon. He could have at least tried it, but obviously suggests he's guilty. And then if that pardon is then found to be a nullity, then I suppose that's yet more evidence that he's felonious and he knows it. He could have resigned and got Mike Pence to pardon him, and there are a few hours left to do that. I thought he might do that, actually, looking improbable now. I think the attempt to impeach him will fail in the Senate, but nevertheless, he's got the unexampled ignominy of being the only president to be impeached twice in the House of Representatives, just as he's the only president to lose the popular vote twice. He's one of only two people in history ever to lose it twice, the other being Adlai Stevenson, who was a very admirable candidate, but what a pity he didn't win. So anyway, it'll fail in the Senate, not as narrowly, more narrowly than last time. About 6 Republicans will vote for it. You need 67 in the Senate. I predict they'll get 57. So the fanatical Trump mob, they will penalize any decent Republican who actually is conscience-stricken and votes against Trump, but very few of them have that moral courage. So, but you voting against him now when you supported him up to this point is really a deathbed conversion, and it's just, they're doing it at the 11th hour because they've got an eye to their own long-term career. It's all about electoral calculation. I'm not saying that the Democrats are any slouches on that either, but some people have been complicit in his outrageous felonies and gross deceits for 4 years, and all of a sudden the scale has fallen from their eyes. Well, I don't buy it. This road to Damascus. Nary a word in dissent was uttered by most Republicans. Never chided him. I know there were some honourable exceptions. So I think banning him from standing for election next time would be a mistake on the part of the Democrats. I mean, they're not going to manage to do it, but if they could do, I still think that would be an error, because obviously he's a loser. He's lost, and then he lost again, the popular vote. I know he won the Electoral College by a fluke the first time. So you're presumably going to lose even more, and he is a loser. That's it, and people don't like losers. You got one shot at it, and that's it. He's yesterday's man. His mental declension will continue. He may well have a stroke or a heart attack. He's owed one because he's so obese, he doesn't take exercise. And as I say, his mind is deteriorating fast because he doesn't read. Speaking a second language really keeps the mind going. So I think he'll just be a complete drooling, gibbering wreck in a wheelchair in 4 years' time. Because even now he can scarcely walk, doesn't walk more than 100 miles. All the signs of pre-Alzheimer's and various other conditions. Someone who's so moronic, he thought that this cognitive ability test was an IQ test and boasted about getting these embarrassingly easy questions right. It would be better for the Grand Old Party if he were blocked from seeking election again. The GOP is usually canny when it comes to maximising their electoral chances, but I think they're not being quite that bright on this one. They could then distance themselves from him, but they're weighing it up. No, but then you alienate tens of millions of foam-flecked Trumpists. So I suppose that's why some of them are not going to go for it. Because if he doesn't get the Republican nomination, and almost certainly he won't next time, though he might try it, then he may well stand. And that would take several million votes away from the main GOP candidate. Think back to major third-party challenges. Ross Perot twice. Admittedly, he was not a Republican. He's a Reform Party. We'll think back to the 60s, 1960, or indeed 64, George Wallace, 1948, Strom Thurmond. These third-party challenges, which skew the outcome, taking several million votes away, even taking a few states in 1948 or in 1962, even 1964. But anyway, he'll be even more senile next time. So some Republicans are now going to bogusly claim that they opposed him from day one. Nobody was a day one abominator of his. I know Mitt Romney spoke out against him, but he fell in line when Trump was the nominee. None of them, bar Michael Bloomberg, had the gallantry to cross the floor, to put country before party, say, no, I'm backing the other side. Just like Joe Lieberman, out of principle, he backed John McCain for the presidency, despite being from another party. So some people have got very short memories, and this ahistoric narrative will convince the foolish. So the obituary of the Republican Party has been written many times before, and I think it would be highly unwise to do so again. Think about Watergate or Iran-Contra, or even 2008, the end of the Bush presidency, with very low approval ratings, with the credit crunch, or all through the Great Depression, losing 5 presidential elections in a row. So no, although there are various factors moving the Democrats' way, more ethnic minority people and younger people disproportionately Democrat. I know that was often the case, but this is more so than ever. But there are rays of hope for Republicans, as in more African Americans going their way. On the face of it, they would run out. The Republicans would run out of church-going whites in the countryside, but not that soon. So I don't think we can sound their death knell just yet. Long-term decline, but this could be arrested. It could be reversed. They could win over more groups. Democrats could fumble the hand dealt them and alienate core constituencies, and they are silly enough to do so. They've proved it time and again. So I sense that the Republican Party is capable and dangerous. It's Protean. It can shape-shift from being hawkish to dovish, as Trump has as well, lying about his record, being for the liberation of Iraq, against the liberation of Iraq, and so on. Likewise Afghanistan. So is Trumpism transitory? Well, we're about to see, because the proof of the pudding is in the eating. Will he shut up? I think a lot of people will be fed up of him, and a bit of quiet and placidity from Biden will be rather appreciated. Only speak when you've really got something to say, and don't feel you have to dominate the news cycle all the time. Trump won't be reported very much. I mean, most of the media is absolutely sick to death of reporting him. His inanities, his vulgarities, his dishonesties, and so on. His profanities, his blasphemies, his vulgarities, and everything else. His vanity. They've had enough. And so is much of the public. I know there's a hardcore of Trumpists who just lap it up, who can never get enough. But the media couldn't refrain from reporting him because he was the president, because he was consequential. But he'll go down in history as one of the most hateful, imbecilic, gangsterish, and immoral caitiffs ever to occupy the White House. Someone utterly unfit for command, so unworthy to be commander-in-chief. So Biden's ushered in many ways, an anticipatory presidency. Kamala Harris might be more active than most vice presidents. Obviously, she's a first in various ways. First African American to hold either of the top 2 positions. The first Asian American to do so. The first woman to do so. Biden may well be more or less an intercalary president. He's 78. I mean, his health is pretty good for a man his age, but he could still have a heart attack or something like that. Didn't he have brain surgery decades ago? So will he make it to the end of his first term? That's not a safe assumption. So we might have President Harris sooner than we thought. And also she shares a surname with the previous president. I remember how Toby Lahren attempted to nix Kamala Harris's career by accusing her of les coucheries utilitaires. And I don't have any evidence that she was bed hopping for the sake of personal advancement. Wouldn't bother me if she was. So, wow, quite a low blow. But anyway, there are those who say there's that curse of Tecumseh, that presidents who are elected in a year ending in 0 are hexed. Certainly from 1840 up to including 1960, they all died in office. Not necessarily that term. FDR won in 1940 but died in 1945, but still in office. But 1980, yes, Reagan was shot. He was a guy elected in 80, he was shot the next year, but he survived. George W. Bush was never shot or wounded during his presidency, still alive. So that might just be twaddle. I don't believe in these superstitions myself. But there's a palpable lack of expectancy about Biden. I remember the atmosphere was electrified by Obama's inaugural oration. And the expectations were just unrealistically high. He was almost certain to disappoint. It's not that case with Biden now, because what we've seen him before, as vice president. He's a white male, and what he's offering really is a restoration of normalcy and predictability, of a bit of tranquility. It seems his watchword is like no disasters. A safe pair of hands, if ever there were one, couldn't possibly be more experienced. The big idea is that there is no big idea. So he's already disenchanted many on the left with his caution on healthcare, his moderation on energy policy, his circumspection on anti-poverty programs and so on, and just a return to business as usual on foreign affairs. So don't expect any breakthroughs. But anyway, I very much want to see the back of Trump. I would love to never hear from him again. I would dearly love for him to go to Supermax for Reclusio Perpetua. However, I think it's highly improbable that shall transpire. Toodaloo.